Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. Earlier this week, fishermen on the Outer Banks made a big splash online when they caught and released a great white shark on Cape Hatteras. WRAL's Shaun Gallagher talked to them about the experience and joins me now in the studio. Shaun, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so, these sharks, I think you were saying it before we started recording here, like, we're all kind of like fascinated.
Super fascinated.
By these sharks. So what is the video that these fishermen posted about catching the shark?
Yeah, so they were in Frisco on the Outer Banks, which takes about 5 hours from, the Triangle to get there. And they were out there, and it's kind of the tail end of their fishing venture from the shore. There's a mammoth, just giant fish.
Yeah, I felt the weight of that fish, and I was like, yeah, this is it. This is him. We did it. We caught the white shark.
I mean, there's probably about 6 guys, kind of wrangling this shark, which is a great white. Everybody knows that's like the apex predator of the sea. You know, obviously all the movies about it and everything like that. But, it's these guys that are, sort of wrestling it in a way to get it back in the water. I mean, it's a little bit of a chaotic scene because the shark doesn't actually get all the way out of the water. That would be super dangerous for the shark because they're guessing that it weighs about 1,500 pounds. And,
We've been preparing this for 2 years.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's the fish of your life. Being able to put my hands on that animal, dude, it's mesmerizing.
Most people don't think it's possible, but we showed that it was possible.
These guys essentially, are all operating in unison to get this shark back out into the water after reeling it in. And the video ends as soon as the shark kind of kicks out and goes out back where it came from. Just like utter jubilation from these grown men that, it's very childlike. I think kids are super interested in sharks. And for a lot of these guys, that never went away.
Yeah. And so they post the video. Who are these guys that caught the shark?
Among the coolest people I've ever met.
Cool.
They're just like, they are, lifelong beach guys. One of the guys that we talked to that was there and we interviewed, he was barefoot. And we were like, I was like, hey, like, wear your shoes, man. Like, just kind of joking around, trying to, do that thing to loosen him up. He's like, I don't own shoes. You don't own shoes? Like, what are you talking about, bud?
Very Outer Banks.
Yeah. And he was just like, I don't like how they feel. And, like, we talked to him about the snow, and he was like, just deal with it. Whatever. Just, like, ultimate, like, salt of the earth kind of guys. But, you may see them from their appearance and think, beach bums, like, whatever. These are just kind of like, the most relaxed, chill dudes you'll ever see. But I mean, they're super smart. They know a lot about the sea. They know a lot about fish. They've caught giant fish in the past, both of these guys. Jason Rosenfeld and, Luke Beard they live this. They've caught giant hammerheads. They've caught, stingrays that, their wingspan is as wide as I am tall. And, any fish that you could name, but the one thing that they'd never caught was a great white. But that was a goal for them, the same way we all are super fascinated by it. They're tenfold fascinated by it, and that was a goal for them to try to land this fish, a fish that they are super fascinated by, but also respect the heck out of. That was something that they were nervous about talking to us. Period about this because. They already saw some of the comments online from their video when it went viral of people questioning, is this legal? Are they allowed to do it?
If you think we don't have ethics, like, you're out of your mind.
We care about the animals more than they think, and honestly, we might care about the animals more than they do.
What are they doing? Thinking that this was harmful to the shark, and they took offense to that because they love these things.
Right. And like you said, they've been fishing for a long time. Are they North Carolina natives? Did they come to the coast specifically for the types of fish that are out there? I mean, what's kind of their background with that?
Yeah, they've lived all over and now call North Carolina home. They just think, the Outer Banks, is the perfect blend of what they need in fishing. they kind of were speaking well above my head when it was talking about that, like the different things with the currents and, where they are on the Outer Banks is, 20, 30 miles out from the true coast and what that offers them from a fishing perspective. So, Luke is from, the Virginia area. Jason's lived, all over. I think he said he grew up in New Jersey, but, he actually was down in Wilmington for a while, but then he moved up to where he wasn't in the Outer Banks because it's all about fishing for them. They picked a spot, and it is that spot for why they wanted to be there. And, this story proves that they picked the right spot.
Yeah, let's take a quick break right there. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the laws around catching great white sharks. So, Shaun, before the break, you were mentioning that, these guys, they post the video, and unsurprisingly, as anything that one posts on social media, there were critics that got in the comments and a lot of people who were questioning what the laws were around catching one of these sharks, letting it go, all those kinds of things. So let's just start there. Is it legal to catch a great white shark in North Carolina?
Catching, yes. Keeping, no. That's the the very basic way of putting it. NOAA, who I'm going to blank on the full explanation of what their acronym is, but if you know NOAA, you know it. It's the group that kind of regulates the federal waters for fishing in a way. They have a rule that recreational fishermen they can intentionally fish for great white sharks, flat out. But there are some stipulations in what happens once they reel it in. Without getting too in the nitty-gritty with it, they essentially need to keep the fish in the water, so it can't go all the way out onto the sand, kind of like we were talking about before the break. Just that, one, that would be difficult and it would put the animal in danger. But two, keeping them in like kind of that shallow water, you can kind of keep a little bit of water running through their gills, just try to make it as easy as possible for them. And then they have to use, special hooks and things that will limit the damage from people trying to fish for them, which Luke adheres to above and beyond. He actually makes his own hooks from hooks that they have at the Rod and Gun Tackle Shop there in Frisco. He does them especially to try to limit the damage so that they're, easy in, easy out, that it's not going to tear up the shark's mouth or anything like that. And that's basically, the rules as far as NOAA is concerned. And all this stems because, there's, issues with the fishing trade from, decades ago, slicing off fins, keeping them, tossing the rest of the fish in for no reason. And, that really impacted, all sharks, but specifically great whites. And, back in the 90s, a lot of these rules came into play to protect them. So, it is allowed. These guys were not catching these fish to harm them. They were probably a lot better with these fish than your average angler that's out there.
Okay. And so, you mentioned that these guys specifically moved to the Outer Banks because of the difference in fishing there as opposed to sort of the inner part of the coast. So are there a lot of great white sharks off North Carolina's coast?
Yeah, I think that they said, they picked that spot not just for great whites, but really like all fish that, migrate up and down the coast. But, Luke was telling me, there are people who surf all throughout the year and they see great whites all throughout the year. But, largely he was saying to me that they pass by the Outer Banks in kind of these cooler months. So basically from winter to early spring and, but he said you'll still see them into the summer. And it's largely because of, what it offers at the Outer Banks, that, it does offer a shallower area for, these sharks to feed or, possibly mate. But that it also is just an area that you're out there. I mean, it's like being out on a boat when you're out on the Outer Banks, but you got houses and beach behind you. So, yeah, it's just a perfect ground for all wildlife, really.
Right. And how common is it to catch one like these guys did?
super rare, especially I don't know if it's been made clear yet that they did this from the shore. They weren't in a boat.
Wow.
And they wouldn't get into the specifics because they don't want people to try to recreate this because they won't call themselves professionals because they're not making a living by chartering boats or anything like that. They actually don't do any charters, but they told me that if people come up to them and they want to learn about it, they will share their knowledge for free, but they don't want to put this out on a grand scale so that, the average family who goes to the Outer Banks thinks, hey, why don't we try to catch a great white today? That's going to put the fish in danger, they feel. But, this was a thought out process that they had to kayak the bait out. Like you're not going to cast out the bait to try to catch a great white. And then there were a number of other specifics that they didn't want to tell me because they didn't want it in a situation like this for me to tell it, for people to recreate that. But a 2-year process where they talked with a friend who has caught, they say dozens of great whites all over the world, but they are in a very small company right now. They said that maybe a half dozen to a dozen people have caught great whites from the shore like they have. So, yeah, definitely quite a club that they're in right now.
Yeah, well, I know, like you said, they're just over the moon. What can people do if they do encounter a shark along our coast? I mean, you mentioned that they anecdotally have friends who surf and have seen them. Shark bites are pretty rare, but they do have happened. So what can people do if they see a shark along our coast?
Yeah, always important to, remember that it is very rare for an attack to happen. I looked up stats before this. It's like 1 in almost 4 million.
Yeah.
But, always good to protect yourself, be smart. Some things that I saw were, avoid unnecessary splashing. If you do see a shark, try to keep eyes on it and back away slowly. That's the thing. You want to remain calm, which, it's going to be very hard if that's your first time seeing a shark in the ocean. And, everything that you've seen about sharks, likely in the news, is always bad. But, just treat them with respect and back away, stay calm. And then also some preventative things. If you have a wound of any sort or you're bleeding, don't swim. Don't wear any shiny metallic jewelry when you're out in the ocean. Avoid swimming with your dog. I mean, it's an animal. It could be viewed as, prey for a shark. So taking those steps and, also understanding that, it's pretty rare. All those things put together should, help you should you encounter a shark like this.
All right. Thank you so much, Shaun. We'll talk to you later. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.